because really body is capable of healing itself if you give it the right conditions. And most people are confused about what food to choose. And when you talk about carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and calories, people are always confused because not everybody knows what that is.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing that I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today?
Hey, Hadar. So what are we talking about today?
Well, you know my favorite topic is food. And you also know that my favorite thing to do is to take care of people with skin disease. So can we combine the two, maybe add some flavoring, a little yoga, a little dosha? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, we're going to do more than that because we're going to add in one of my favorites, which is Ayurvedic approaches. So, of course, how can you do that without talking food? And today we're going to get a little bit of help. So we're going to be talking to Pushpa Soundararajan, who is a registered dietitian and nutritionist with over 30 years of experience. And she's also an Ayurvedic practitioner, certified yoga teacher, and she also does a lot of speaking and writing. And in fact, she's written 2 books. And she's done it to 2 different audiences. One is to the practitioner. It's called A Primer on Ayurveda, A Practical Guide. Gosh, I think everyone should read that book. And then one for the general public is called Ayurveda and Yoga, A Path to Health and Healing. So I think it combines everything that we were looking forward to, Pushpa. So thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Pushpa, it's wonderful to have you here and someone who synthesizes all the worlds of practice, both the traditional and the so-called alternative, but who knows what's what anymore, right? And so I wanted to jump into it and start talking about acne because today we wanted to focus maybe on that piece, although we know that Ayurvedic practice is really, really broad and holistic. But maybe you can try to guide us through the way Ayurveda perceives acne and understands it, because then it'll help us to understand how you approach treatment.
Okay, sure. First of all, acne, generally when it comes to skin, anything to do with skin, it's called Kushta Roga, and it is generally associated with Pitta dosha. But depending on the symptoms the person has, could be Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, or any of the 3. So if it's more dryness and darkish coloration, it's going to be more like a Vata thing. Pitta is more reddish in color, kind of burning sensation, having some ulceration, having some oozing liquid in there and things like that. And of course, inflammation and all of that. And then of course, Kapha would be more like a whitish color and having a lot of like pus kind of stuff coming out of that. So I think acne in general, it's a predominantly a Pitta thing, maybe a little Kapha involvement as well.
Pushpa, can I ask you a question? Can you
Sure.
define doshas and what they represent within Ayurveda?
Sure. So there are 3 different types of doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata, so they're based on the 5 great elements from air, space, water, fire, and earth. Not in that order, but I just gave the 5 of them. So each of these doshas are a combination of all 5, except dominant in 2 of them. So they take on the properties of those 2 elements. So if you take Vata dosha, it's dominant in air and space. So it's very subtle, cold, light, moving, things like that. It's also responsible for all the movements in the body, the respiration, the circulatory system, digestive system, things moving, the food moving, and all of that. All of the movement in the body is governed by Vata. It's a kinetic energy. Then the Pitta is the second one, which is dominant in the water and the fire element. So it gives a little more heating in the body. It's helpful in digestion, transformation in the body. So again, it also helps with a color. So the color of the skin, any kind of color is related to that. Luster in the body, all that is related to the Pitta dosha because of the fire element, which gives you both heat and light. And then, of course, the third dosha is a Kapha dosha, dominant in earth and water element. That is a nourishing part of our body. And it's more solid in nature, gives stability to the body and all of that. So those are the 3 doshas. And the reason Pitta is more involved is, the burning and the inflammation is basically related to Pitta dosha. So that's why I said acne would be more related to the Pitta than the other 2.
First of all, it's wonderful to hear that defined by you, the 3 doshas, and definitely helps me, someone who's not versed in that discipline, to understand that and also kind of think of conversely and how I was taught in medical school to think about various processes. And you can
Mhm.
easily find a lot of analogous back and forth between inflammation, for example, as you mentioned, or growth, what we call neoplasms, and dryness, the skin we call xerosis. So there's definitely a lot of crossovers, and it's just another way to explain things that we see in front of us. Now,
Right.
in terms of acne, you mentioned that it's pitta is the driving force, and I think that as clinicians, we definitely see a lot of that red, angry acne that's coming at you from the skin, just jumping and
Mhm.
saying, I'm going to scar this person. And you want to definitely quiesce in that. But we definitely see different phases of it. It starts, sometimes it's not as inflamed, sometimes
Right.
it's already scarring or even dry sometimes. So when you look at people with acne, do you find those subtleties as well? And how do you explain that according to Ayurveda?
I mean, generally, it's actually an adolescent disease, right? It starts at that puberty time. And usually, I think the reddish is more common, I think, than the other types. So it starts with actually, according to Ayurveda, all of this starts with a bad diet, like having an unhealthy diet, more of an oily food and spicy food and those kinds of things, and sour, salty foods, and also incompatible foods. This is a big thing in Ayurveda that modern nutrition doesn't even talk about is combination of foods.
Pushpa, I definitely want to talk about incompatibility because I really think that you're onto something there.
Right. So I think I've also found a study that talked about how the skin disease, is related to these wrong combinations given in Ayurveda. And of course, first of all, what that does is when you combine sour foods and milk or dairy products with fruits or meats with the dairy products, all of these things cause a lot of indigestion. And then when there is indigestion, it forms ama, or just called toxins. And these toxins start to build up. And this is what is there in the koshta, or the digestive system. So once it starts accumulating in the digestive system, if you don't get rid of it, if you do this all the time, and if you don't get rid of the toxins, then they start to spread outside the digestive system. This is where the gut leaking they talk about, and they start moving. Then it finds the skin, and it moves to the skin, and then develops these acne or even psoriasis and all these other things as well. So that is why it's very important to eat a healthy diet, wholesome diet, and also eat the right combinations. Now, the milk and fruit can be healthy by themselves, but when you put them together, they actually mess up the digestion quite a bit. And then Agni is a very important concept in Ayurveda. Agni is the digestive capacity or the digestive fire in the body. So if your digestion, the digestive fire is not working well, then definitely you're not digesting your food well. And then the other thing, it also has an impact on your bowel movement. So you can also have constipation. Again, constipation is said as one of the causes for acne as well.
So, Pushpa, I really like that idea of incompatibility, but let's break this down for a second. So,
Okay.
when you
Mhm.
see someone, right, and you say to yourself, all right, this person diet is off, how do you understand what is compatible to this person in front of you and what's incompatible?
Okay, so this is not about compatible to the person. Of course, we always talk about the doshas, right? We look at what kind of dosha there, what imbalance. So, for example, if somebody's having heartburn, hyperacidity, and those kinds of problems, then we know they have a pitta imbalance. So, in their case, I will talk about the different tastes of food. For them, usually it's more eat more sweet foods, bitter and astringent foods. So when we talk about combination, we're not just talking about combination with their body type, we're talking about the combination of foods themselves. For example, and nowadays everybody drinks smoothies and parfaits, those are all wrong
Yes,
combinations.
all the
So
wrong combinations.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
they think it's so healthy because you're putting a bunch of fruits in there and some milk, and what's not healthy about that? But
That's hilarious. That's
yeah,
unbelievable. Okay.
but see, they have different properties and different digestive speed, like how they are digested in the body. Fruits digest very quickly, whereas the milk and yogurt and stuff take a lot longer to digest. So what happens is the fruit sits in the body, starts to ferment, and this is where the bad, the gut bacteria come into play, and they cause bloating and gas and all that. And then when you have indigestion for a long period of time, then you start to get heartburn and everything starts to back up. So this is how the whole thing works. So usually when I have a patient, then I would tell them, don't eat fruits, don't make smoothies, eat fruits separately, eat them in between meals, don't eat them with your meals. And especially, dried fruits and stuff, it's okay. You can cook it with your oatmeal or something, but definitely not to add like fresh fruits to your meals. That's something that's very easy to tell anyone.
When we look at some of the food issues,
Hmm.
while pitta is the imbalance, all of the research right now is really focused on the cauffic foods, such as dairy, and if it's like
Yes.
high glycemic index, or even now they've shown there was a great meta-analysis that looked at like 53, or it was a systematic review, looked at 53 different studies, and they also showed fried foods were part of that. Now, as people move away from dairy, which is happening, they're moving towards things like almond milk, or say oat milk, or perhaps like macadamia milk, or choose the designer milk, or I should say
Mhm.
beverage that people are using. Do you find that that's a little easier to pair with different sorts of fruits or different sorts of smoothies, because people are maybe moving away from dairy altogether?
I mean, I know you can substitute that, but that's also still makes it very heavy. So if you have a good digestive capacity, then it's okay to have those. But if your digestive capacity is not very good, then I still would not combine those things. I mean, technically, yes, you can combine those. When it comes to milk, again, when you look at dairy products, you can't put milk, yogurt, everything together, because milk is actually considered to be very cooling in Ayurveda. So it's actually cooling for the body. It's good for a pitta person, and so is ghee. Whereas yogurt, anything that's fermented, yogurt, cheeses, sour cream, all of these things, those are actually heating for the body. So those are the ones you really need to avoid. Now, milk, what you can do is maybe not drink cold milk, but you can boil it and make that golden milk, with put some turmeric in there and some cardamom and a little bit of sugar. Or when it's if it's lukewarm, you can add a little bit of honey. So that actually is okay. But you want to choose whole milk, not the skim milk and all these, the low fat and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying drink a lot of milk, but definitely milk is still considered to be cooling for pitta. It's not completely bad.
No, what's interesting about this is I like what you're saying here, because you're taking milk and you're kind of altering its, I would say, characteristics, because you're putting in all these other spices, which is kind of how Ayurveda works.
Correct.
Although it cools pitta, it does flare the kaphic states of acne. So they've shown that, taking milk and even whole milk will still flare the insulin pathway, and it'll still affect acne. In fact, the retrospective studies that have looked at the epidemiological studies show that all forms of
Hmm.
milk do it. But
Okay.
I don't think they've ever studied it with like what you just said, which is so innovative. And it's
Right.
like such beautiful approaches that Ayurveda has, which is to put the curcumin in, I mean, the turmeric in there, or to put, different spices, because now you've changed the entire character of that milk. And that clearly wasn't studied
Exactly.
in any of these studies.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, and when you boil the milk too, you're kind of breaking down those protein and the fat in the milk. So that's why even in India, we're used to boiling milk. I mean, we boil it for a different reason, but still,
Yeah.
boiling the milk actually helps you change the quality also.
Yeah. Now, what about pasteurization? Since all milk that's being sold is probably flash pasteurized to a high temperature anyway, does that make a difference to what you're saying?
I guess pasteurization is mainly for the bacteria and stuff, but I think more than that, we should also boil it in
I
order
see.
to. But you can boil it and cool it and drink it. Drink it warm. You don't have to drink it hot. But definitely the boiling helps it break down some of that kapha you're talking about in the milk.
Milk at Pushpa's house. We're doing it.
And of course, adding the spices is very important. The turmeric is bitter taste, and then you have cardamom, which is cooling in nature, the spice. Nutmeg is also warming. So some of these things actually change the properties also. So think about that.
I would really want to touch upon this, because this is something that I think it's easy to just bypass. I want to just pause on this point because it's such an important point and very unique to Ayurveda, which is that you can take any food or any sort of drink, or for that matter, even topical oils. And, if they're studied in a certain way, when you start incorporating herbals, or you start incorporating other sort of temperatures that you're introducing, you change its character. And that's a real power of Ayurveda, is you can change the character of something to then dial it into whoever you're
Right.
trying to pair it to, isn't it? So I think that
Right.
that's
So there's no
such
right
an
or wrong
important
food.
point.
It's more about how you modify it to suit the
Yeah,
person's needs.
exactly. So this is fascinating. We should do a study on turmeric, or like modified milk against regular milk, and then see what happens. That
Yes,
would be
that
very
would be great,
fascinating.
actually. Yes.
So maybe the smoothies will be back. There's different type of
Absolutely,
smoothie.
Pat.
We're getting calls now to our call center. People are crashing the lines asking about their smoothies. So thank you for saving the smoothie.
Yeah.
All right. I do want to touch upon some form of lifestyle or maybe exercise. I know that you do a lot of yoga, and I wanted
Hmm.
to ask you because I have a lot of patients with acne and a condition called hidradenitis suppurativa. And a lot of times we recommend physical activity. We say it's healthy. You need to move the body around. Maybe it's going to help you to lose some weight as well if
Hmm.
that's an issue for you. But can you talk about yoga and how people, first of all, how is it helpful, potentially helpful for people with acne, for example? And then
Sure.
also, how do you do it if you are sometimes can't really move, because I know it's a lot of a challenge for our patients where they
Mhm.
can't do rigorous physical activity. So I'm wondering if you have some tips on that as well.
Sure. Again, yoga also has to, when you use yoga as a therapy in Ayurveda, we have to tailor make it for the person's needs. If you're Vata, Pitta, Kapha, what kind of balancing they need.
Exactly.
So you can't just do like sun salutation for everybody. It's really it'll increase pitta so much when you do sun salutation.
Thank you
But
for
at the
saying
same
that. I almost crashed on the floor with that one. Thanks.
Yeah. So if you're like a Vata person is doing sun salutation, it's good for heating up, but then they also have to hold things longer. Otherwise, it just increase their anxiety even more. But if it's a Kapha person, they can do sun salutation, but they're not inclined to do it because they don't like to move. But if they do it, it's actually helpful for them. But for a Pitta person, the yoga posture should be more of like forward bending, like surrendering poses or even twisting poses. They can even sit on a chair and just do some twist to hold for about 30 seconds one side and then twist to the other. Kind of inhale and stretch your spine, and then exhale and twist to one side, and then come back to the center and then do the other side. I recently shared a YouTube video for specifically for pitta balancing, very very mild yoga sequence. So something like that, which is restorative, relaxing, that could be good for a person with acne. Now, the second thing is, of course, pranayama or controlled breathing. It's basically you're extending the breath, but then there are some cooling breaths that they can do, which will cool the body down. One of them is a couple of them, Shitali, Shitkari. Those are all little, you have to learn from somebody. But one thing they can do is called a Chandra Badana, which is like a moon. You basically inhale through the left nostril and then exhale through the right, and then just continue that. Or you can even inhale through the left and exhale through the left. So that'll kind of cool the body as well. So they can do like 10 of those in the morning, 10 of those at night, or whenever you're feeling hot, even when you have heartburn and stuff like that, those are things that will help you.
Thank you. That sounds really cool. And you did mention your YouTube channel, I believe. Can you let our audience know where they can find that video if they wanted to check it out?
My channel is called VPK Nutrition Mind Body Healing with Pushpa. And basically, I started that last year because I feel like if people understand how to choose food and lifestyle for their body type and how they understand their body, then they can give the right things to the body so the body can heal itself. Because really, body is capable of healing itself if you give it the right conditions. And most people are confused about what food to choose. And when you talk about carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and calories, people are always confused because not everybody knows what that is. But when we talk about taste of food, people know what it is, right? When I say don't eat salty foods, you know what salty is.
Yes.
And the other thing is for the acne, I also wanted to mention the taste which are suitable are sweet, bitter, and astringent. So sweet would be like, if you take vegetables like carrots and sweet potatoes, those are all good for them to have. Or some, watery vegetables like cucumbers and squashes and things like that are good for them. Fruits, again, juicy fruits, grapes, pomegranate, which is astringent in nature. And then juices like pomegranate juice, amla, gooseberry is very good for acne. They should definitely have, you can get gooseberry juice or even gooseberry one. You take one, you can get these frozen at the Indian store. You can just warm it up and eat that. That's also good. So these are certain things that they can do at home. Like aloe vera juice is very good. Like 4 ounces of aloe vera juice in the morning and about another 4 ounces later on. That's also cooling for the body. So these are some things they can incorporate in their diet.
That's fantastic. And I think if we can have a little bit of Ayurveda in every nutritionist, clinical nutritionist in the country, I think we'll be just a bit healthier as a nation, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. That's why we did that course. And we actually had 9 people sign up for that course. One of them was a doctor, the others, all of them were dietitians.
Fantastic. And to those who are listening to us, I just want to mention that if you want any other information and learn about what Pushpa does for the entire universe, go to www.vpknutrition.com, vpknutrition.com. You can find her books and her teachings and hopefully make another connection in our ever expanding community of integrative dermatology. Pushpa, I want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. I wish I could share more, but I know we have limited time.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode with Dr. Raja and Dr. Hadar. This podcast is brought to you by Learn Skin, leaders in integrative dermatology education. Visit learnskin.com/podcast to explore our many programs or subscribe to the podcast today and never miss an episode. Hey, have a great day and stay curious.